Let me tell you the funniest thing that has ever happened to me. I mean that genuinely. I have reframed it as funny because the alternative is a level of sustained rage that would require medication and probably a dedicated support staff, and I'm a busy woman. So, funny. My husband of 11 years, a man named Christopher who had a firm handshake and very good hair and a habit of over-explaining wine to waitstaff, had, for the entirety of our marriage, been maintaining a second household 40 minutes away in a suburb of Charlotte, North Carolina. Second household. I want to let that phrase sit for a moment because I think it deserves more contemplation than it usually gets. Not an affair, not a girlfriend he saw on weekends, a household, a woman named Brenda, 2 children, a boy aged 9 and a girl aged 7, a dog named Biscuit, a mortgage in a name I will describe as an extremely clever variation of his own that had somehow passed the necessary checks, a life, fully furnished and operational, running parallel to ours like a train on a hidden track. I am a tax attorney. I specialize in high net worth individuals, complex asset structures, and the kind of financial arrangements that other attorneys look at and say, this is going to take a while. I am, without false modesty, very good at my job. I have spent 20 years learning exactly how money moves, where it hides, what structures people use to make assets disappear on paper while remaining entirely real in practice. My husband, my charming, wine-explaining, extremely confident husband, had spent 11 years hiding approximately $3 million from me through a series of structures that were, and I say this with genuine professional respect because I am capable of that even under these circumstances, not unsophisticated. Not unsophisticated, but not good enough. Here is how I found out, which is the part that, when I tell this to my friends, makes them put down their drinks. I found out because of a Christmas ornament. Christopher traveled frequently for work. He was in commercial real estate development, which meant he had genuine reasons to be in various cities at various times, a fact that I now understand he had selected and cultivated partly for this reason. He was in Atlanta the week before Christmas, or so he told me. I was wrapping presents in the living room on a Sunday night when I found, in the pocket of his winter coat, which I had pulled from the closet to wear on a walk because mine was in the dryer, a receipt. The receipt was from a Christmas tree farm, date-stamped the Saturday prior. 2 adult admissions, 2 child admissions, 1 dog admission, because apparently this particular Christmas tree farm had a policy of charging for dogs, which I found remarkable even in context. Total, $47. Christopher had told me that Saturday he was in Atlanta for a site walkthrough. Now, a Christmas tree receipt does not prove a second family. A rational person could generate various explanations. A rational person without my professional background might have filed this under things that are strange but inconclusive and circled back to it. I am a tax attorney. We do not file things under inconclusive. We pull the thread. I did not confront Christopher. I want to be clear about this because I think the impulse in these situations is to understand the confrontation as the important moment. It is not the important moment. The important moment is what you do before the confrontation, in the quiet, with the full exercise of your faculties. I spent 3 weeks pulling the thread. I was discreet and I was methodical, and I was, if I am being fully honest, terrifyingly calm in a way that I think scared me slightly when I reflected on it later. I have a capacity for clinical detachment that serves me enormously in professional settings and occasionally raises questions about my emotional range in personal ones. In this instance, I am grateful for it. What I found over those 3 weeks was this. Christopher had established, approximately 1 year before we were married, a holding company in a state with favorable privacy laws. That company owned a stake in a real estate partnership. That partnership had, over the years, generated significant returns, which had flowed into the holding company and from there into accounts that were not connected to anything in our joint financial life. He had also, through carefully timed transactions that showed real understanding of how to create distance between money and its origin, moved funds through two additional layers. $3 million, accumulated over 11 years, hidden with genuine skill. He had also, and this is the part that I think he was most proud of, where I can imagine him feeling the particular satisfaction of a person who believes they have thought of everything, structured our marital assets in such a way that in a divorce proceeding, what was visibly ours was heavily weighted towards things that were in my name but had depreciated, and things that were in his name but had liens against them that reduced their apparent value. On paper, a divorce would have left us roughly equal in a way that would, upon examination, given me very little. He had built an exit plan into our marriage from the beginning. I sat with that knowledge for 2 days before I did anything. I want to be honest that those 2 days were not calm. The clinical detachment had its limits, and I found them. I am not going to describe those 2 days in detail because they belong to me, and I don't owe anyone the specific texture of what it feels like to discover that your marriage was a financial instrument wielded against you by someone you slept next to for 11 years. I will say only that I got through them, and that on the other side of them I was something I had not been before. Completely clear. I called my attorney on a Wednesday morning, not my firm. I needed someone outside my professional world, someone who could represent me without the complications of colleagues and conflicts. I called a woman named Vivian, who is a family law attorney in the region and who has a reputation that I will describe as opposing counsel tends to go quiet when her name comes up. I told Vivian everything. I showed her what I had found. She was quiet for a moment after I finished. Then she said, "You did 3 weeks of forensic financial investigation on your own husband." "Yes," I said. She was quiet again. Then, "Are you available to start Monday?" Here is where I need to be precise about something, because I am an attorney and precision matters to me. I did not do anything that crossed legal or ethical lines during my 3 weeks of investigation. Everything I accessed, I had legitimate access to as a spouse or through proper channels. Everything I found through legal means. I want to be clear about this because this story is not about doing something clever that bends the rules. The rules, followed correctly, were entirely sufficient. What followed was a legal process that I will describe as brisk by the standards of these things. When Christopher was served, I was not present. I had chosen to be at my office, at my desk, working, because I am a person who processes things through occupation, and because I had timed this deliberately so that I would not have to be in a room with him during the moment when he understood what was happening. I had, by this point, moved the most essential personal items and documents out of the house and into a temporary arrangement I had prepared in advance. He called me 4 times in the hour after service. I did not answer. He sent 12 text messages, which I read and did not respond to. They progressed from confusion to a kind of performed calm to something that was, by the end, not calm at all. The last message said, and I will paraphrase, that I needed to understand that I was making a mistake, that this could be resolved, that he had explanations, and that I should call him before I did something that couldn't be undone. I found this message interesting because it told me everything I needed to know about how he understood the situation, specifically that he still believed he had control of it. That he believed the financial architecture he'd built was solid enough that an explanatory conversation could change the trajectory. He had forgotten what I do for a living. Actually, I don't think he had forgotten. I think he had made an error that I have seen many intelligent people make. He had compartmentalized. He knew in one part of his mind that I was a tax attorney who specialized in complex asset structures, and he knew in another part of his mind that I was his wife who trusted him. Those 2 things had not, for 11 years, been in conversation with each other. He had, in effect, hidden things from the wife and forgotten he was hiding them from the attorney. What happened in the legal proceedings I will describe in outline, not detail, because the detail would take longer than this story warrants, and also because some of it is subject to a settlement agreement that has confidentiality provisions I intend to honor. The holding company was identified and traced. The asset structure was unwound. Expert witnesses confirmed what I had already mapped. The real estate partnership returns were quantified. The marital estate, properly defined to include what had been hidden, was substantially larger than what Christopher had arranged for it to appear. There was also the matter of Brenda, who had known about me. This I had suspected and the discovery process confirmed, and the two children, who had known nothing, and were, in this entire situation, the people I felt most clearly and uncomplicatedly sorry for. They had a father who had also lied to them, in the most structural way available, by building their entire life on a foundation that could collapse, and that had now collapsed. I do not think about Brenda often. I think about those kids more than I expected to. Christopher's attorney, a man who had not, I think, initially understood the full scope of what he was dealing with, had a conversation with Vivian at some point in the process that Vivian relayed to me afterward. He had said, apparently with genuine bewilderment, that he had never seen a spouse come into a divorce proceeding with this level of pre-prepared documentation. Vivian had said, "She's a tax attorney. This is what she does before breakfast." This is not strictly accurate. I had done most of it in the evenings, but I appreciated the narrative economy. The settlement was, by any measure, significant. I will not give you a number because that is not the point, and also because of the confidentiality provisions. What I will tell you is that the exit plan Christopher had built into our marriage, the careful structure designed to ensure I walked away with very little, did not function as intended. I would like to tell you that winning felt the way it does in movies, that there was a moment of clean triumph that I could bottle and describe. There was not. There was a Tuesday afternoon in Vivian's office when we went through the final settlement documents, and I signed where I was asked to sign, and then I sat in my car in the parking garage for a while. Not because I was devastated, not because I was processing anything dark. I sat there because I was tired, the specific cellular exhaustion of a person who has been running on precision and controlled adrenaline for months and has just been given permission to stop. I sat there until the tired passed enough that I trusted my driving. Then I went home. Home, at that point, was a rented house I had found 2 months into the process. A nice one, nicer than I had initially thought I should get, and then I had reconsidered and decided that nicer than I should get was a thought pattern I was retiring. It had a home office with good light, a kitchen I was slowly learning to actually cook in rather than treat as a refueling station, and a small garden that I was, very badly, attempting to maintain. I called my mother that evening. She is 71 and lives in Virginia, and she has an opinion about everything which I have spent most of my adult life finding exhausting and now find, more often than not, comforting. She asked me how I was feeling. I told her I was feeling like someone who had run a very long race and was currently sitting on the ground at the finish line eating a banana. She said, "Did you win?" I said, "Yes, Mom, I won." She said, "Good, now get off the ground." I have been getting off the ground since then. Here is what I want to tell you, though. The part that isn't about the money or the legal strategy or the satisfying narrative architecture of a tax attorney dismantling her husband's tax architecture. The part that I think about in the quiet. I gave 11 years to a marriage that was, from the very beginning, not what I believed it to be. I was not stupid. I was not naive. I am a person who professionally detects concealment, and I did not detect it in my own home, in my own bed, at my own dinner table. That fact does not leave me. I have done substantial therapeutic work around the question of how and why, and I have arrived at something that is not an answer exactly, but is livable. He was skilled, and I trusted him, and trust is not a character flaw. But I will tell you what else is true. Somewhere in those 3 weeks, somewhere in the process of sitting quietly with what I knew when deciding what to do with it, I found something I did not expect to find. I found out that I was, at my core, exactly who I had always thought I was. That the person I had built over 20 years of professional discipline and intellectual rigor and early mornings and hard work, that person was intact. Christopher had lied to me. He had not made me into something I wasn't. He had not taken anything that was actually mine. The money was important, I will not pretend otherwise, because pretending otherwise is a form of dishonesty I have no patience for. Financial security is real and it matters, and I am grateful for it. But the money was not the thing that walked me out of that marriage intact. That was me. That was mine. I am 46 years old. I have a rented house with good light. I have a garden that is mostly a disaster, a recurring theme in these stories apparently, and I will say only that I find gardening to be a useful practice in humility. I have a mother who tells me to get off the ground. I have Vivian, who has become something closer to a friend than a former attorney, which is an unexpected outcome. I have a professional life that I am very good at and that I return to every day with something that post-Christopher I can only describe as relief. The relief of being in a room where I know the rules and I know how things work, and the structures are the ones I built. I have not yet figured out what comes next in the personal sense. I am not in a hurry. I have become suspicious, professionally and personally, of arrangements that look very clean on paper. I am taking my time. I went to a Christmas tree farm last December, by myself, which I will acknowledge is a specific choice with a specific meaning that my therapist and I discussed at length. I paid my admission, I walked through the rows of trees in the cold air, and I found one that was exactly the right size for my rented living room, and I paid for it and drove it home in the back of my car, and it dropped needles everywhere, and I did not care at all. I put it in the corner by the window with the good light. I put on music that Christopher had hated and I had always loved. I decorated it by myself, which took longer than it should have, and it was slightly uneven on one side, and it was the best Christmas tree I have ever had in my adult life. There was no ornament in any coat pocket. There was nothing in this house that was not exactly what it appeared to be. That is the thing when you have lived for 11 years inside a structure built on concealment, the radical, almost dizzying quality of a life that is simply, plainly, exactly what it looks like. I stood back and looked at that slightly uneven tree in the good light, and I thought, yes, this, exactly this. This is what I was working toward all along, and I just didn't know it had a shape yet. Now I do.